Choice Removed, Part 2. Raymond looked at his bare feet and drew in the stink of his pits. That is easy, he nodded to himself. Heaven, that one is hard to believe. He could still hear his father's laughing, bitter proclamations of where he would go. Sure, Elijah watched him. What would you know? He snapped. Raymond hummed a poem deep in his throat, too low for the sheriff to hear. More than you think, Raymond, the sheriff presumed, letting out a low breath. Hell is where you are when death is better. Raymond devoured the sheriff's words. He jerked his legs forward, mind drifting to thoughts. He hummed a poem, its unsettling cadence nagging in the air. The sunlight dimmed, casting the forest in deepening shadows as they plodded along in silence. The salty tang of blood haunted them, and a thirsty reek bit into their stomachs. North of them, branches broke, matching their pace for a minute, before stopping abruptly. An odd, deep knocking echoed through the forest from above. The air thickened, and the sheriff cursed their proximity to the lake. "Sheriff?" Raymond barked, making Elijah jump. "When did Rutger retire?" The sheriff watched the forest. It was clear of brush or small trees. The trees were old here. He didn't, Elijah sighed. Rutger had served the people of Lear County selflessly. Raymond paused, then shambled forward. Suicide by cop, Elijah muttered, studying him. The sheriff thought of Rutger, who had taken an interest in him after the football game. He always had been a part of his life, but it had changed after Elijah had won the game. The former sheriff had taught him the law and the people of Lear County. Townsfolk saw them together on ride-alongs or just having a milkshake. If only Raymond had made it to the football game, he would have escaped his family. The sheriff knew life could have changed for his friend, but fate had another course for him. He listened to the knocking, thinking, I never escaped. Raymond dreamed of leaving, and football was the only thing he was ever good at. If only he had been at the game, he thought. Even those who cursed his family name would have to cheer for him. It had been a long time since he allowed himself to believe life could have been different. "What happened to you, Ray?" Elijah asked. His brow furrowed. Everyone knew about the aftermath, but no one knew what had led to it. Everyone had said that Ray was evil, but the sheriff had his ideas. Again, the man walked in silence for a time. "The football game," he spat the words almost without thought. "Some choices never let you go." The sheriff recalled the game and the cheers of the town. "I recall," he nodded. "You never showed up." It would take time, but Elijah would get the full story out of him in interrogation. "At the end, I was there," Raymond mumbled, eyes wide. He attested to the forest as if to answer it. The horrors still clung to him. His heart was still stained. The roar of the crowd carved through the days. All of Lear County was at the game. They cheered for Elijah, who looked for him. He was too late. Recruiters in the crowd didn't care about his family, only his talent. A place where no one cursed his blood. It almost made the beatings and torment bearable. "Why did you do it?" Elijah begged, cursing the pleas in his voice. He had heard about what happened to Raymond's parents, though the darker details came later. Part of him still believed that his friend was incapable of such insanity. He thought of the clearing and the mayhem inflicted by the man's hands, the blood on them. "Something promised me," he whispered over his shoulder. The knocking rose around them, and both men froze. Raymond glanced nervously at the forest. His father always told him he'd go no further than him, and the town and the world had agreed on where a Villalobos kid would end. He was right. "Who promised you what?" the sheriff demanded, stepping back and pointing his gun at Raymond's heart. Leaves drifted down from above as he tightened his grip on the pistol. He closed his eyes and he squeezed his hands into fists. "I never escaped," he hissed. "You could never understand." "Understand what?" He caught a shadow move, but it was only an old dead tree. "People like you have choices, I reckon," he shrugged with a miserable laugh. Raymond stopped, giving the sheriff a sly smile. "They pinned that star on your chest, and I bet you didn't even think twice about it." He pulled his eyes away, but they returned to the man's throat. His hands trembled, fingers turning to hooks. "No," Elijah frowned, but his face reddened. Was it so bad that life came easy for some? The question stuck in his mind. The former sheriff had ended with his daughter dead in his arms, and Elijah wondered if he ever questioned his path. It had never occurred to him. Raymond's dad had assured him that he would make Lear County proud. The patriarch of the Villalobos family had told him he should pursue a football career before returning. He had never said that to his son,